And welcome back to another episode. What episode are we on now,
Uh,
Mark?
oh shoot. What?
21? 22?
Yeah. No.
So,
22.
episode 22 of Occasionally Philosophical. I'm Doug.
And I'm Mark.
And where are we at this week, Mark? Why don't you bring us back up to speed? Where did we leave off?
Well, we were talking about choices um last time and kind of the illusion of choice, or do we really have choice? How much choice do we have? But
Right.
yeah. So since we've, touched on manufacturing consent and things like that, I think that kind of like the illusion of choice kind of maybe leads into, what we're calling the fear machine, or just fear, I guess fear in general, if that makes sense.
Well, like kind of lead me in. So we were like last week we were talking a little bit about, like this illusion of choice, that
Right.
we have in our modern capitalist economy, right? How the algorithms, et cetera, feed stuff to us, right?
Right.
So it's kind of pre-selected, that manufacturing of consent thing. And then it's like, well, what else do these algorithms and this sort of environment that we live in, right? What else is that pitching to us? It tells us that we have all these choices, and you mentioned the fact that I almost did it this morning because I made my breakfast sandwich and I was almost out of ketchup. And your thing is that you like to go to Trader Joe's because they just have ketchup. It's
Right.
not like 12 different brands,
Yeah.
you know. So, but that is that really a choice? Like really your choice is which brand of ketchup, but the
Yeah.
fact that it it's you that's what you have. It's you go
Right.
to the grocery store and there's all this stuff and you think you have choices, but
Y-
really it's just different packaging on the
Yeah.
same
I mean, it's like,
underlying stuff.
yeah, I have the choice between like mustard and mayonnaise and ketchup and those type of choices. But as far as like that's why I think I like to refer to it as the illusion of choice, because it's like, oh God, look at all these choices. But it's like, you're making it seem more than it is, right?
Yeah, yeah. And and you don't realize what's not offered,
Right.
right, to you,
That too, yeah.
which
How the
and so that kind of ties back to our deeper theme, which is the voice of mother culture and the fact that this way of living,
yeah.
right, this capitalist extractive economy is the only possible way. So all of the problems with it, you know, our choices of whether to live in the system or not are constrained, or whether we even can conceive of another way of living,
Right.
but that was, we kind of laid that foundation early on, and we're trying to build on that now
Yeah.
and see how it goes. Uh,
Right. So anyways, I guess, what is it? Fear. So,
what about fear?
what about fear? Um, I
You've
guess
said
we
that a couple of times.
what?
Fear.
Fear. Yeah.
So far today, so
Um, yeah, I guess so fear is necessary, right? As an evolutionarily speaking, you know, it basically, the short version is in the past, fear kept us safe. You walking in the dark and hear a twig break. It's like, oh no, what's that?
right, right, right. So it has an evolutionary advantage. The
Right,
person who climbs the tree when they hear the twig snap doesn't become lunch.
right. And maybe there was something there, maybe there was nothing there, or maybe it was a little small animal that wouldn't have been able to make it lunch. But either way, it's important to a certain level of fear, but in our civilized society, I think fear has become, used as a tool in a lot of different ways. Um, mm,
It we have this evolutionary evolutionarily installed fear response, right? That apparently enabled ancestors to continue to survive and propagate, and now we're here. And yet that that ability to feel fear seems um manipulated in the modern world. Is that seems to be what you're aiming at least, because you keep going like fear, and then you're like trying to grab onto something, and I'm gonna help you find that thing that you're trying to grab onto.
yeah, basically, it's. I mean, I think that fear has just been used by we'll just call them the elite for just, whether it's you, rich people, politicians, whoever you want to, the people that are in power,
Okay, yeah, all
use
right.
fear, and sometimes it's on purpose. Sometimes it's just part of what, gets reported and what have you. Um, but I guess I'm just gonna throw this out to you.
All right, fair enough.
Is do you think that, like, in the system that we live in the story that we're telling, is fear necessary? I guess
Oh, well, that's a good question. Is fear necessary for the system
for the
that we live in?
system to work, I guess, or whatever.
Well, the paranoid part of me, right, says, yeah, because every time you turn on the TV, it's here's something to be afraid of,
Right,
right? Um, you pick up the newspaper, right? It's be afraid, be afraid. I mean, even AI, for God's sakes, like half the people that are talking about AI is about how it's going to bring about the death of humanity, right? While the other half is saying, bring it on,
right.
so, right. But the fear of that, right? When you see ads for medicine, it's always, oh, this thing you might possibly have this or that or this other thing. So, um, yeah, that's a tough one. Is it necessary? Ooh, well,
Well,
it's certainly used.
yeah,
I'm hesitant to say necessary because it seems like there might be other ways to organize a complex society like the one that we live in
yeah,
without fear being like the driving factor. Although I do think it certainly seems to have a lot of repercussions. At least if I'm looking at what's going on in the world, it seems to me that you can trace it back to people being afraid of something, of living in some sort of fear-based story.
right. And
I don't know, maybe we can try to unpack that a little bit?
what do you like that? What do you
Well,
mean?
I when you told me that, we were this week we were gonna touch on, this fear thing, I was like, "Oh," I start walking around my library, right? All right, and I grabbed this one book, a little thin volume by the Buddhist, scholar or teacher or whatever, Thich Nhat Hanh, on fear. And he said that in his tradition, this Vietnamese Buddhism, um, the womb was like the palace of the child because as a baby, an infant, you're fed, your mother breathes for you, you're floating in this nice warm environment. And then birth is all violent. You're shot out of the birth
Yeah.
canal and then you're cut off from your air and food.
Yeah.
And suddenly you have to breathe for yourself. And he calls this primal fear, right?
Right.
And it's who's going to take care of me. And this is one of um, the jobs of growing up, right? Is first we have our caregivers that take care of us, and then we learn to care for ourselves, and overcoming that fear. And it's a nice little book with some exercises in that to help you recognize when your fear is rational and when it's kind of irrational. It's this ancient fear of not being taken care of at birth.
Yeah.
And I was reflecting on that a little bit. And then I have another book called The Culture of Fear, which is basically looking at the media environment and the way that makes us afraid of everybody. Nuclear war, environmental degradation, pollution, immigrants,
Yeah.
and all of that. And then I have yet another book that I read a long time ago called The Gift of Fear. And this is now, interestingly enough, the guy who wrote the book had actually grown up in a kind of a violent household with a mother who was not wrapped too tight, who would like shoot her s- husbands and that.
Wow.
So he developed his thing is recognizing that when something's off. Right, and he tells a story, like, he opens the book with a story about a woman who was raped, but she escaped when she put the clues together that this guy was actually gonna kill her after the rape was over,
Right.
right? And then he develops this whole story about how we live in a violent world and we need to pay attention to that. And then I thought, you see, he's actually contributing to the culture of fear by saying that we live in a violent world,
Right.
right? And not to say that his statistics and all of that aren't accurate. We do live in a violent world.
Right.
But And then that reminded me of yet another book, which is called The Hacking of the American Mind, which has to do with not only our like media environment that we live in, but also how our diet and that influences how we then respond to these environmental cues.
Mm. Yeah.
So yeah,
And actually,
all of that rolling around in my head makes me wonder about this, whether it's necessary or just a side effect of the complexity of the system that we live in, that you have to maintain some kind of control, and it's easier to control somebody who's afraid than it is to control them by appealing to their reason.
yeah, I also kind of would say it's a byproduct just because of back to the whole evolutionary fear thing. It's like we're naturally scared of stuff, and just because we live in a society. But I do also think that it's like what is it? If it bleeds, it leads. It's like
Yeah, the old news story.
so it's like there's, I mean, and yes, there are humans on this planet that are committing violent acts for good or bad. Well, let's just not say good, but for most likely bad reasons. And, only the reason why I even said good at all is maybe somebody might make a case for justice or revenge or something like that, but whatever, anyways. But there, but
Oh, you mean their motivation was good even though you could say the motivation was good, like, revenge,
right,
you know?
like I don't know, killed my brother. I don't know. And I'm gonna avenge his
Yeah, I'm gonna kill you, right,
or
right.
whatever. But that I'm getting sidetracked. But yeah, so
Yeah.
there are, but so yes, it is good to be cautious. I mean, in there's scammers, there's people with their hand in your pocket that are not going to give you nothing. So it's a little, fear is good to like, you know what? Maybe I need to have a little bit of fear to protect myself from there are things out there. But I think what ends up happening is the media amplifies certain things, whether they have a specific motive, which I feel like a lot of times they do, or it's just something that happened that they're like, "Oh, we're just going to run with this." You know. And you see it all the time because it's like I see a lot of people talk about this, whether it's, on YouTube or TikTok or various, content creators. Why aren't they talking about this? Why aren't they talking about that? So it's like this particular story is getting amplified and every news outlet is talking about it and it's stirring up some kind of fear. You mentioned immigration, immigrants. It's always been. I mean, I would say it's new, but it's pretty much always been a thing in America. The immigrants are taking your jobs or whatever, right? Since back when I don't know, like they talk about back when the Italians and the Irish and everybody came over here, and it's always they're taking your jobs. But so there's this fear, right? But then there's other stories that might for whatever reason don't get as much coverage. That could, you know, be scary as well, I guess. Or maybe that's even more important. Maybe there's a local story that, there's somebody in your neighborhood that's dangerous.
Well, yeah, and one of the one of the things in that book that I mentioned, The Hacking of the American Mind, like, he opens the book with a vignette about how and it's a number, it's just over 2,000, I can't remember the number exactly, but in the aftermath of 9/11, when people weren't getting on airplanes,
Yeah,
right? They were afraid to fly, even though flying is still statistically safer than driving.
right.
That apparently at the end of a year or whatever after 9/11, the statistics of, like, highway deaths and
Yeah,
that in the year after it, there would been 2,000, whatever this number was, more deaths that were directly attributed to people driving more and not flying,
right,
right? And he said, "This is the cost of fear,"
right.
right? And, and then I was thinking, well, here's another perspective that can wrinkle this up even more. Um,
Yeah,
David Graeber, the anthropologist, wrote a book called The Utopia of Rules,
yeah,
and this is basically his, exploration of bureaucracy, and I think the subtitle is The Secret Joys of Bureaucracy.
yeah,
Right. But basically that as a society, grows and you now store like the food storage thing, back to Ishmael again.
yeah,
When you're storing the food, now you have to keep records.
right.
And well, how much food do we have? Who got it? And all this stuff. And as your society gets more complex, these number of rules for how things move around grows as a consequence. And the way to enforce that is, he says it's state-sponsored violence.
Oh, yeah,
That's what he calls it.
yeah,
Now, of course, he's a Marxist anarchist, so,
yeah,
you take that perspective as well. But basically, it's the threat of force from the state.
right.
Now,
Prison
he
or
says state-sponsored violence, but it's like if you live in a certain neighborhood and you don't if your trash cans are out in the street, you get a ticket,
right,
right? That's the state placing its, and that he calls it violence.
right.
That anything like that, that imposed from outside is in that book, at least the way I interpret it, it might not be. I don't wanna say that that's what he's claiming, but he uses that as state-sponsored violence, and so that might also be part of the fear, right, that we live under.
Right.
Not so much not that abject fear, "Oh, bear."
Yeah.
Right, but that if you don't walk and stand and sit in a certain space in a certain way, that something bad's gonna happen to you,
Right.
right? And that's a different kind of fear that's also prevalent in the society, it
Yeah.
seems like. Not for us, we're, white men in a white supremacist society, so we don't have those fears as
Right.
much as like, right now with all these stupid ICE raids and everything,
Right.
there are a whole bunch of people that are living with a fear that you and I
It's a
would
constant.
never
Yeah.
know.
Right.
Unless, of course, we find ourselves enemies of the state in some way, you know?
Yeah.
Remember that Will Smith movie?
Oh yeah. That was a good
Yeah.
movie.
That was a good movie. That was our early surveillance state paranoia,
Yeah.
what, like 30 years ago?
Yeah. I still think I was and trying to do a little bit of research for the podcast. I ran across something that basically says that I think like government like overreach or whatever is still like is still the people's like one of people's still top fears.
Yeah, but again, since we're talking about fear, these are all these fears that you have, right?
Right.
Like, well, for example, the other day, now, I've been using, you use ChatGPT, I use ChatGPT and Claude, and the other day I saw this article that like Sam Altman, like one of the improvements for ChatGPT to make it more useful, to integrate it into your life, to make it, better for you, is this remembering everything,
Yeah.
everything, everything you've ever said to it, all the documents that you share with it. And I think, ooh, no, 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 no. Because the thing about people, like, you can talk to someone for years, right? And there'll be things that you talked about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, they've completely forgotten about,
Right.
right? And that's good, right? Because it allows you to grow and change as a person and not be nailed down to how you used to be,
Yeah.
right? But the other thing that made me think, and it triggered my little paranoid, the part of my brain that's paranoid, is, how, like, um well, there was this, in fact, I don't know, I haven't seen anything about it, but there was a guy running for senator or something up in Maine, and apparently he suffered from PTSD, Iraq veteran and stuff like that. So in the immediate, like, aftermath of him coming home, he's online saying some shit, right?
Yeah.
And now, some years later, he's calmed down and what have you. But now people are going back, "Oh, you said this like 8 years ago or 10 years
Yeah.
ago," and using it against him. And I think, good Lord, if you've got, like, Chat GPT that's storing all of this data
Yeah.
forever, I don't know. That's weird. So that's a fear that I have as
Yeah.
far as, like, the surveillance society and that
Right.
kind of stuff, right?
No, definitely.
Speaking of living in fear, right? That you're being watched all the time.
Yeah, I don't know. It's something that I think about, but I guess I've kind of come to the conclusion that as so much of my information, just simply for the fact that like almost everything that we do is in somehow interfacing with a computer that has some kind of digital footprint, you know. It's like
Yeah.
you had told me years ago, I mean, I would think I was a teenager when they said that, I don't know, somebody who worked for the FBI or something was like, I could recreate your whole life in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
and that
Yeah, it was
was
one of my classmates.
or class. Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah, I was like,
Yeah, he worked for the FBI. He worked in an FBI field office somewhere in Sacramento, and it was in a business ethics class,
yeah,
right? And we were sitting there, and it was about this information, like how much information is available and what are the guardrails in place to protect your privacy.
yeah,
And he just he just raised his hand, and he goes, you and it was basically on how much information is freely available,
right.
right? Like, you don't need security
I don't even
clearances.
need to
It
be
was
an
his point.
FBI agent.
He's going like, I just know because this is part of my job on like how to like do a deep dive onto people,
Right,
so but I can tell you that in 30 minutes, I can get a pretty good picture of your entire life
right.
on freely available data, not hidden behind firewalls and all that kind of
Yeah,
stuff. And I thought at the time, I was like, whoa,
right.
right? And now we're how many more years later with how much more of our digital footprints,
Well,
left out there.
I it's I think about money, like, in the sense that, like, 20 years ago, I used to, I'd get my check, or I had direct deposit 20 years ago, but my check would get deposited, right? And then I would, like, actually go to the bank and take money out and use it to, like, spend places, because it was like my thing was like, at the time back in like the early 2000s, or yeah, early 2000s, basically, when I was becoming, being an adult and paying all my
Mhm.
own bills and stuff. It was like, and buying my own it's like, oh, Arco, for example, the gas station. It was like, if you could use your debit card, but they charge you a 35-cent fee. Right. So I got into this habit of just having cash on me all the time, because it was like, oh, well, this place has a debit fee. This place has a debit fee. So, like, to avoid those fees, I'd rather just have cash on me, and now, like, I don't ever carry cash. I rarely have cash on me, almost because now the debit card, credit card machine, I mean, I don't even half the time, I don't even need my card anymore, because I could just put my card on my phone, and then I could just tap my phone, you know. So my point with being is that there's even more transactions. It's like pretty much every single thing that I spend money on.
Yeah. Well, you remember when I wouldn't use my debit card to get gas when I was visiting you
Yeah.
when you were staying with your mom that year in
Yeah.
Sacramento. I wouldn't you because I could make it from LA to Sacramento in 6 hours and 15 minutes,
Yeah.
right? Well, if you're driving at the speed limit, that's an 8.5 to 9 hour drive,
Right.
right? So I'm flying up 99, right?
Yeah.
So what I didn't trust was that I would use my ATM card at the Arco at the on the entrance to the 405 there.
Yeah.
And then when I got to Sacramento, I would fill up again because I was almost out of gas,
Yeah.
and then they would be able to take the timestamps, right?
Right.
That was a fear that I had then. Now, unfounded, of course, I
Yeah,
was
they weren't tracking.
paranoid as hell, right?
Yeah.
But um it's still possible,
Right.
right? And now we've got cameras flipping everywhere,
Oh, that too.
right?
Yeah. Yeah,
And
everywhere it's like everywhere you turn around, it's like, and not even just in businesses. I mean, everybody got Ring cameras now, and
oh yeah.
you know,
Well, and I saw this photo essay the other day, and it was somehow or another the whatever lens that they put on the camera that they were using to take pictures of, they could see the infrared lights coming out of these various cameras. So like when you hold your phone up, there's this infrared beam that's scanning your face.
oh wow,
And then when you're walking around outside, suddenly you have these like infrared license plate readers and
yeah,
Like, good grief. So talk about, like, there's another aspect of fear that you're being monitored all the time,
Right.
you know, and how does that affect you? Right? Because I think when I think about fear, like what the story that you live in, if you're living in a story that has you feeling fearful all the time,
Yeah.
what that makes you do, how that causes you to behave in the world.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, more where I get concerned, 'cause, we all have fears. I mean, it would be you would be inhuman if you didn't have any,
Right.
and I think that, um, it's also so much of our lives are either online or through online,
Yeah.
and so, you and I've talked about this before, but it's like the difference between engaging with people on, via text messaging or anything like that versus engaging with someone when you face to face,
Yeah.
and the things that you'll say and do face to face are different from the things that you'll say and do via an interface like this or a text message or these mediating technologies that we have.
Yeah. I mean, you just reminded me because it happened and I was playing Apex the other day. But it's like you have these people online on the game that will just say whatever to you. I had a guy, I won't say exactly what he said, but he essentially accused me of being some kind of homosexual, and that I was terrible at the game. And and it's like I actually just, I don't engage in that because I
Right.
just I never have, even when I mean, I don't even want to put it on the fact that I'm older now and it's just pointless, but even when I was younger, it's like I don't want to argue with somebody over Call of Duty or whatever,
Yeah, or
right?
anything like that.
Or anything like that. And I'm definitely not gonna call you all type of names, like I don't know you or whatever. But anyways, back to my point of even bringing that up is like, yeah, like you would, if we were standing face to face right now, you wouldn't say that to me because you might get
Right.
knocked out or whatever. Like, I mean, that's like a worse, like worst case type of scenario, but like, that type of thing. Yeah. What did you say back, back in the night? The anonymity of the digital medium,
Oh, yeah.
it emboldens people.
Oh, it does, and I mean, it's been written about forever,
Yeah.
and, so w one of the reasons I think that, the fear thing becomes so prevalent is because we live,
A lot of it.
in this environment,
Yeah.
like, all the time.
Right. I think about the because everything is at, the speed of light, basically the speed of fiber optics, like information goes from all across the globe, instant. So you hear about, it's like, okay, there's a murder, right? Oh, but you hear about murders everywhere, right? So it's like,
Mhm.
oh, there's a murder over there, there's a murder over here, there's a murder over there, and it's like, oh my god, like the whole world is just full of murderers, like, and it's like, whereas, well, I'll go back. Man, let's just go back 200 years just to be safe. Go back 200 years. A lot of that, those external fears weren't, that weren't necessarily like yours, right?
Well,
Because your world was
your world
smaller,
was smaller.
right?
Yeah, we're now plugged into the globe, the
Right.
global village, right?
Yeah.
And you live, you know, southeastern Westchester County, and if you were paying attention to local news, and
Yeah.
that was all you were really paying attention to, like what was going on within, say, a 10 or a 20-mile area
Yeah.
of your home, you would get a very different picture of what the world is like
Right.
versus, you know, waking up in the morning, getting your coffee or tea or whatever, your beverage of choices, and opening up your news feed and seeing about environmental degradation, earthquake, lava flows, murder, war, genocide, yeah, that the entire planet's on fire, it seems like it.
Right.
And then it's, oh, well, there was another mass shooting over here, and there was a murder over there, and a rape over there. And you're like, oh my God,
Right.
lock the doors.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
well, for example, like, speaking of the media environment that we live in fear, there's an well, of course, billboards now are all electronic. Most of them are anyway, so they change all the time. And there's a couple of them around here that you drive by and the local police for whatever town the billboard's in, lock your car, take your keys, hide your stuff. That's what the thing says.
Yeah.
I'm like, "Well, why?
Right.
Why are you telling me that? You trying to make me afraid that everybody around me is gonna steal my car and my stuff if I don't have it locked up?"
Yeah.
Like, okay,
Right.
it's a low grade fear, but if you're consuming that all the time, right?
Yeah.
Then what's your behavior? Oh, oh, you start to walk away from your car. Oh, we gotta make sure I locked it, right? Oh, you're halfway down the driveway and, oh, you stop, you gotta turn around and run it back up to the front door to make sure that the house is locked.
Yeah.
Because if you're gone for 20 minutes, somebody's gonna back up with a truck and
And
unload
right.
everything that you
Yeah.
own. At least, and that I realize it's hyperbolic,
Well, and
but
those are small examples, but yeah.
but the all of these things add up, right? You're driving and you see lock your car, hide, take your keys, hide your stuff.
Right.
And then, you're in the store and you're glancing over the headlines in the newspaper and it's about war in Gaza or
Yeah.
war in Ukraine or, earthquake kills 7,000 people in, Jakarta, Indonesia, or whatever it is.
Right.
And and it just keeps adding up, and all of a sudden, it's like by the time you get home, it's like, "Whoa,
Yeah.
God, lock the door."
Right.
Puts a deadbolt on, I'm safe now, I'm home.
Right. Yeah, it kind of I mean, even, the I guess the kind of the people that need to feel like they need all kind of protection. Oh, I need a gun. I need this to just even go outside, and it's like to me, right? Like walking around with a weapon, whatever kind of weapon, it's like maybe you can call me privileged or whatever, but it's like I don't, I guess I've been in very few situations in my life, where I felt like I needed a weapon, but I have been in zero situations where I felt like I needed a gun, and I'm not have always not been on the right side of the law, so to speak. So it's like I've been in situations where, like not the average person might, I don't want to get into all of that, but I'm just saying, like in
Yeah, I
general,
I would prefer not to know that much.
yeah, so it's, you know, um, but yeah, I guess my point is I've never been in a situation where I needed a gun because I don't, not that obviously, like we said, we're everybody's scared of stuff, and fear is a defense mechanism, to keep you safe. I'm not walking around saying I'm not scared of anything, but I generally try not to live my life in fear. Like I know I could die in my car, right? I drive my car every day. Yeah, it's dangerous theoretically. I mean, hey, a lot of people, I would argue that maybe the driver's license test in this country is a little too easy, you know, but I do it every day because I don't want to live in fear. And I only say that because there's people like, there's people my age. I only say this because I live in New York now and I've met a lot more people that don't have licenses, like adults that don't have licenses. So it's like, but a lot of them, it's like, it's not just because they live in New York and public transit's easy. It's some of them are like legit just scared to drive, you know. I mean, I know somebody that has, they're an older person, and they've had their license for years, but like they're scared to go on the highway. They just do local driving. Which, I mean, I'm not, but I guess my point is like there's those different levels of like how much
Well, yeah.
fear are you letting fear control your life? And I try not to, for the
Well,
most part.
that I think now we're sort of, because we all have fears, and fears
Right.
are natural, and we live in a society that's complex, and there are things that it legitimately
Should be
you
scared
should
of.
be afraid of,
Right.
right? That you should at least be worried about,
Right.
right? But
Weary.
yeah, wary of. But I would say that where it becomes dangerous or debilitating, right? It's when you start, like, when you don't make choices because you're afraid of something,
Right.
right? Like that kind of thing. Like, I'm afraid of this thing that the media is telling me to be afraid of,
Yeah.
right? But I don't have any direct experience of it,
Yeah.
Like, I don't have direct experience of an immigrant being aggressive to me, right?
Right.
Like a criminal immigrant. I
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
have any direct experience of that. In
Right.
fact, most of the people that I meet that are immigrants are very nice.
Right.
They go out of their way to be nice
Yeah.
to me.
Right.
Now, is that because of, they're afraid of, white devil? I don't, whatever it is,
Yeah.
I don't know that, right? But I don't have this experience where I don't feel where me walking into a certain neighborhood, I don't, like, oh my God, this is bad for me.
Right.
Now, when I was young, before I joined the army, before I had my, awakening into the actual ways of the world, I found myself in Harlem one day,
Yeah.
in like, what was it, 1972,
Well.
right? And to be a white boy in Harlem in 1972, you stood out like a sore thumb.
Yeah.
Right? Like, yeah, like, it was me, my car, 2 of my friends, so there were 3 white boys in a car in Harlem,
Yeah.
and we're looking around, and there is just black people everywhere. There's not even a white shopkeeper.
Right.
And so, and we were worried,
Uh,
like, "Oh, man, we need to get out of here," because, you know, racial tensions being what they were in the early 1970s,
Yeah.
right? And we've internalized all these stories that we had never challenged,
Right.
right? About what black people were like, that they were gonna be violent, they were gonna rip us, they were gonna tear us apart.
Yeah. What are
You
you
know?
doing in our neighborhood or
We
whatever?
didn't know, we just knew, made
What
a
you
wrong turn, we need to get the hell out of here. So we
Right.
left.
Yeah.
You know, and no harm, no foul. I'm embarrassed to admit that that was part of my life story, but hey, you know what?
But that's
You live,
part of the
hopefully you grow.
well, and I
So,
think yeah, that's part of the fear that
but yeah,
you're given by
exactly.
the media, right? There's the fear that you gain from personal experience, like, oh, I did that. It ended
Right.
up badly. I got hurt or whatever it is, right?
Yeah,
There's
because
even
I'd never gotten beaten up by a black person ever.
right. You
So
just
why was I afraid of it?
because
Because
of
I was living in
TV
an environment
where
that
there
was
weren't
telling me,
right,
"You need to worry about these people,"
right,
right?
and
"You can't trust them."
right, and because at the time you lived in a neighborhood that wasn't, you
That
know,
was
mostly white.
99.9%, you know, well, the white, which was, the Italians and the Irish had graduated to
To
being full
whiteness.
white people by then,
Yeah.
you know, that's a history of whiteness. You should read that book. That's an interesting one.
Yeah, they keep adding, uh, over the years.
But at any
Um,
rate, but we're actually now we have a role of, like, how the media environment that we live in shapes the things that we're afraid of,
right.
right?
Yeah, definitely, I mean, yeah, it's like the transgender thing, was another big
Oh, yeah.
thing that there it's like I at the end of the day, it's like, I try to always take it back to, like, what I experience in the world, right? Now, yes, I do experience transgender people around, you know,
Mhm.
whether it's customers or whatever, my at work, I'm the customer, the worker that's there, but the amount of them compared to the amount of people, right? In my data, it's like here's one there. I saw 27, I saw 2,000 people and added, in my whatever, 1,000 people in my day, you know, and one or two of them was transgender. But then you look on certain media sometimes and you make it seem like they're trying to take over the world or something like that.
Yeah, there's an army of 'em.
And it's like everybody just wants to everybody just wants to switch. Like it's not has
Well, yeah,
nothing,
that it gets overblown, right? And this is part of the media environment, right?
you know.
So, um, you know, does a society like ours that seems to operate with so much manufactured fear, would you alright, let me ask you, alright?
Yeah.
We do our occasionally philosophical thing. Do you think that my assessment of manufactured fear is accurate, or do you think I'm being, like, over the top?
What do you mean?
Well, in other words, yeah, like, I'm sitting there saying, well, when I look at the world, outside, or at least through the devices that I interact with the world so much of, it seems like things to be afraid of are amplified,
Oh yeah, 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 for sure.
right? So it's like we live in a heightened state, or at least if we're not critically looking at the stuff that's being fed to us, we're living in a heightened state of fear, which makes us more susceptible. It makes us more reactive to the people around us. It makes us more susceptible to being manipulated and led in certain areas,
Yeah.
and that kind of thing. And that's how I feel about it. I'm just wondering, like, from your perspective, do you think maybe I'm being a little bit too over the top? Like, maybe I could tone it down a little bit and not be so, screw the system.
I mean, I guess maybe a little bit, but I mean, I feel like a lot of it, a lot of the fear. I mean, ultimately, I think to a certain extent, fear leads to control, right?
Okay.
And if the people in power are using it, right, that you can use fear to control people. And I think that there is a certain amount of that, that's being done on purpose that is manufactured, you know, in the sense. I mean, we've touched on, Marx a few times, and it's like, oh, my whole life, it's like, be scared of communism. Oh, God, the Red Scare. I mean, they even called it the Red Scare. It's,
Well, yeah, yeah.
and then I don't know, from like we've talked about from my research, I mean, yes, I'm sure there's problems with any political systems because at the end of the day, people are still running it, right? But,
Yeah.
the more I've learned about it, it doesn't seem as bad as I was taught to fear it, you know?
No, and, I like, you told me that you were, like, starting to look into Marx. Well, actually, I told you that if you were gonna be an anti-capitalist, any criticism you were gonna have to
At least
deal with
read it.
Marx.
Yeah.
And be at least, and then since I told you to do that, I was like, well, I better refresh myself, and I'm looking at it and going, well, one of the criticisms that I have of Marx is the fact that his analysis of the political system and that whole mercantile capitalist system seems rock solid. Although his hopes for socialism, communism are based on under, a flawed understanding of what human beings actually are like.
Yeah.
Right. That's my take on it, and we can explore that in another, conversation
Yeah.
because we didn't have
No.
Marx on our agenda
Well,
today.
no, we're just I just was fear of Marx basically,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah. The fear of
it's
communism is
fear.
programmed into us,
Correct, yeah.
right?
Because most people, and one of the reasons why I would say that it's programmed into us is because I would be willing to wager that most people that you ask what is communism, they'll be like, "Oh, communism's
Right.
bad." And then if you ask them to like describe it, they
Well,
won't
they don't
know,
really have a good they don't
you
really
know,
have a good grasp, right?
what it even is, even
Right,
socialism. It's like it's the same thing. It's a boogeyman and socialism. Oh God, oh,
right.
oh wait, God forbid that we actually try to like help people.
Why would we do that? Oh my god.
Oh, gee, that's so bad. And I'm sure there's people, oh, well, socialism, blah, blah. At the end of the day, it's like socialism is the main tenet is this so that everybody can at least have some form of decent life, I guess. But yeah, but there's just all these fears that just constantly get stoked up, and it's like
Mhm.
so like we said, if it bleeds it leads. It's kind of like that Mark Twain. It reminds me of the what is that, if the truth, the lie was
Oh,
go
a
around,
lie can be halfway around the world before the
to
truth
put
gets its pants on.
or shoes on or something.
Or
Yeah,
shoes
yeah,
on or
whatever.
yeah.
But yeah, it's I feel like it's kind of the same thing with fear too. It's like reminds me of, I mean, not that I've watched the news and regular TV structure is not but like back when I was a kid growing up, it'd be like, "Oh, find out what deadly chemical is in your Dr. Pepper," or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Find out at
right.
6. And I'm like, "Wait a
Yeah,
minute." And then you would tune in at 6, and that crazy story that I'm supposed to be scared of is like
right.
at the end of the news hour, and you're like, "Dude, oh my god, like I'm been so scared this whole time, and I didn't even know what was happening." But
Yeah,
like that
exactly.
that my point being is that, yeah, it's always been kind of like, just be scared of this, be scared of that, because
Be
it's,
scared of this, be scared of that,
you know,
"Oh, this is happening, that's happening," right?
you know, I mean, and then there's whole industries. I mean, there's secure ring camera. I already brought it up. You know,
Right,
the whole reason why ring camera is even a thing ultimately is because of fear,
right.
because you're
Yeah,
scared that,
because who's at your doorbell,
right.
right?
I can't
I
even
mean,
open the
w
peephole to look. Like I'm so,
when did we become so terrified that we have to go to our computer monitor to see who's at the front door?
yeah. Or just, I mean, and I get it. People steal, and there's all my packages, and it's like, okay, that's all well and good. So now
Right.
you have somebody stealing your package on video.
Mhm.
Did that make you feel better? You still don't have your package, but
Yeah, you still don't
you
have your package.
voluntarily added to the surveillance system
Right.
because you're scared. I mean, whatever. It is what it is. I mean, but it's I don't know. I mean, right now there's nothing particularly, while I understand that we're being surveilled and that pretty much every purchase I make and everything I do and everywhere I go is either recorded on camera or some sort of digital footprint. Right now, I'm currently not in fear of anybody using that information
Right.
other than to try to extract money out of my pocket because that's pretty much as far as I can tell, that's all they use the information for now is to
Yeah.
try to take all of the money that I plus more. They try to take all the money I have and plus some I don't even have,
Yeah, they take all the money that you have plus some.
you know. But I mean, who knows though? But that's why people are scared. Is some people are way more in fear of like you mentioned, not even wanting to put gas on your card because you thought they were gonna get you a speeding ticket for getting to Sacramento too fast. Like but you that's a obviously,
Well, it's a silly
but
example, but,
it
it was my paranoia at the time of knowing how like, just starting to realize, like, how much information that I was just leaving out there,
right,
right? And it wasn't so much that I was leaving information out there because 'cause we've left information out there about ourselves for decades,
right,
but it was the fact that now these computer systems were able to bring all this together, and the way that they were talking about analyzing and how even, like, the Facebook well, that was before Facebook even, so but, like, how they were already starting to build profiles of people based on their online activity, what they
right,
could get. And that was kind of why I was like, "All right, I'll let the paranoid part of me
yeah,
run the show for a little while. Better safe than sorry." And who knows, maybe that was in the long run, that might have been the better approach,
yeah,
but you can't do anything nowadays without being online somehow,
no.
right? Can't even apply for a job anymore. Like, you can't even walk into ShopRite and apply for a job.
No, like I've noticed that, like, yeah, even at like fast food
All the
place.
retail places, it's like if you walk into any retail store, it'll be apply online,
Or and
there'll
they'll
be a
sometimes
sign
they'll
somewhere.
have or sometimes they'll even have a QR code so you could
Yeah, the
just
QR code where you just hold your phone up,
just scan
and
it
you scan
scan
the
it on your
QR code
phone
and you
and go
can
straight to the app. Yeah. I've noticed that, especially, because I've been doing a little Grubhub lately, just going to these fast food places and stuff. I've been noticing that. So
yeah,
yeah, I
like,
mean that's why like sometimes when people are getting upset with poor people, it's like, "Oh, well, you got a smartphone." It's like, "Bro, yeah, I basically need it." Like, in
yeah,
2025, like, you basically need a smartphone at this point, I
yeah,
can't even apply for a job without a smartphone, you know?
right,
So
so, um, let me ask you something, what does a fearful society gain or lose, right?
well, I mean, we've said it a bunch of times, so you do gain there's a certain amount of safety that you gain just from being fearful, right? So
Sure.
there's that, but I think you do gain some safety from fear, but I also think that like we've also alluded to much over this conversation is that it can also like be used to control, right? And it can push things that to get you scared to like be in I got to be in my house. I got to, I got to order everything online and get, and or I gotta spend money on a security system, and so it's like I guess those are probably like basic examples. Those are more like consumer examples of like
Yeah, yeah, well
selling fear. But there's also like the control. Like it's like I'm can't park here because I'm scared to get a parking ticket. Don't speed, because I'm scared I'm going to get a ticket. Stuff like that. Don't steal because it's like I'm scared I'm going to get caught or whatever. Like there's a certain amount of like
Well, it seems to me that there's something, yeah, you gain predictability, you gain a measure of control, and that kind of stuff. You have a more fragmented society because the more afraid we are to go out and to be around other people, the more we'll stay home and live. And then if people aren't going out, then the community places start disappearing, right?
Right.
Bowling alleys, pool halls, so there's fewer and fewer places to actually go and congregate outside. And now we're all living in our little atomized apartments with our smartphones and tablets and computers. And we're being fed this constant diet of fear, be afraid of
Well,
whatever it is.
and we've been going for about an hour now, but like I was thinking, like the just before we kind of, I guess, wrap up here in a minute. People talk. You even, I think, mentioned it recently, how, like, nobody's going out to public places, or there's no parks or whatever, like the various
Well,
public
if
places
you
where people used to gather, right? And I'm not I mean, part of it's technology. I'm not going to blame this all on this culture of fear, but I do think the whole culture of fear that has happened over the past few decades, at least in this country, it's like it's you got, when I was a kid, I used to play outside. I mean, I remember being as little as 6 years old playing outside unsupervised, like no adults, no nothing, right?
yeah.
Because in the 80s, there wasn't as much of that fear. But then I think we even talked about it on another episode where it's like, the late 80s, early 90s is, oh God, this kidnapping, kidnapping,
Yeah, yeah,
kidnapping,
yeah,
like,
that
and
was the whole McMartin and all that
yeah, the
stuff happened,
Satan
yeah.
worshiper, all that stuff, right? And it's so now, right? The fear, the consequence, I think, of that fear mongering, and that the fear that was being pushed in the media of that time, is
Mhm.
that people are scared to go outside. You're scared to let your kid go out and play.
Right.
I mean, I wouldn't be personally, but like I'm just saying people in general are. So it's not like, oh, go ahead and go, little Johnny can just go to the park. It's like, no, you can only go to the park if I'm standing there watching you. And I don't have time right now. So just go play with your iPad.
Yeah.
Right. You know.
And there are a lot of social consequences to that. I just read an article this morning about screen use on kids, but that we save that for another one.
Yeah. Um,
Anything else you wanna wrap up there,
yeah, I
sir?
think
Since you said we've been going for about an hour, and that's our target.
yeah. Yeah, I think I mean, obviously this is a kind of
Oh, this
a
is
ongoing thing, but yeah, so for now, yeah, that was fear, or our take on fear. And so
on some of the fears that we have to live with, we understand some of them are good and healthy and natural,
yeah.
but if you're, like, super afraid, or if you're really, like, concerned about things that aren't part of your daily experience, that might be a sign that, maybe push the phone away for a little while, or find something else to do for a few minutes to kind of bring it back into, um, what's realistic for you in your circumstances,
Right.
you know? But
Uh,
anyway, where are we gonna go? Where do you think we're gonna head next time, kid?
yeah, yeah, I guess we kind of touched on this already with the arrogant ape, but I guess we can kind of like move into back into kind of like a human exceptionalism, you know.
Yeah, what makes us so special?
Yeah, I mean, if we assume that we're the main characters, where does this belief lead us? Or what does it cost us? Or what is it?
Well,
I mean,
one of the things that it's gotten us is what we just finished talking about,
yeah, it's got us for
right?
fear. And And I think it's cost us our freedom
In a lot of ways.
in a lot of
Yeah.
ways, I would think. But anyways, that will be next episode. That's the teaser. So if you made it this far, once again, to the
We appreciate it.
210 or so of you that subscribe, thank you. We
Yeah,
appreciate
thanks
it.
for subscribing. Thanks for hanging out with us. If you enjoy our conversations, and not just enjoy our conversations, but wanna join the conversation,
That's a good one. Yeah.
drop us a like, give us a comment. I try to get to all the comments, not always within a couple of hours, but within a day or 2 or a week
Yeah.
of them showing up, and, let's see where we can go. Where our goal is to understand the world that we live in and maybe aim ourselves at a better story
Yeah. And
than the
maybe
one that
I
we're
don't
coming
know,
up
here
with.
I'll throw this out there too if you want to join the conversation and maybe you have a subject that or story that you'd like us to touch on, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah,
Throw
drop that
drop it
in.
in the comment. We'll try to
Let's see if
get
we can get to it.
get some listener request type of episodes going.
Or if we can make any sense of what you wanna talk about.
Right. All right. Well,
Alright,
once
thanks a
again,
lot.
this has been episode 22 of Occasionally Philosophical. I'm one of your co-hosts, Mark, and you are
And I'm Doug, and we'll see you next time.
all right.